Learning to trust God's timing is one of the most challenging yet rewarding aspects of our spiritual journey. We live in a world that values speed and instant gratification, where everything is expected to happen immediately. However, God operates on a different timetable. His timing is perfect, but it often doesn't align with our own. Trusting His timing requires patience, faith, and a deep understanding that there is a purpose behind every delay, every wait, and every moment where it feels like nothing is happening. It's in these moments of waiting that some of the most profound growth and transformation take place. When we think about trusting God's timing, it's essential to acknowledge that God sees the bigger picture. While we may be focused on the here and now, concerned with our immediate needs and desires, God has a long-term plan for our lives. He knows what is best for us, not just in this moment, but for our future. There are times when we might feel frustrated because we're not seeing the results we want as quickly as we would like, but God's timing is always intentional. He is orchestrating things in ways we cannot see, ensuring that everything aligns perfectly for the greater good of our lives. What might feel like a delay to us is often divine preparation. One of the most common struggles people face when trusting God's timing is the temptation to take matters into their own hands. When we don't see immediate results, we can become impatient, trying to force outcomes or rush through situations. However, when we take control instead of waiting on God, we often end up making decisions that lead to more confusion or delay. The story of Abraham and Sarah in the Bible is a prime example of this. God promised them a child, but when the fulfillment of that promise didn't happen quickly, they took matters into their own hands. The result was unnecessary complications and heartache. If they had waited for God's timing, they would have avoided much of the pain they experienced. This story teaches us the importance of patience and trust in God's plan, even when it doesn't unfold according to our expectations. Patience is a key virtue when it comes to trusting God's timing. It's easy to be patient when everything is going according to plan, but the real test of patience comes during the waiting periods of life. Whether we're waiting for a breakthrough in our careers, healing from an illness, or clarity in a relationship, these periods of waiting can feel excruciating. However, the waiting process is often where God is doing His most significant work in us. Waiting is not passive, it's active trust. It's during these times that God is molding and shaping us, developing our character, strengthening our faith, and preparing us for the blessings to come. The Bible says in Ecclesiastes 3:11, He has made everything beautiful in its time. This verse reminds us that God's timing is not just perfect, but beautiful. What may seem like a delay to us is actually God's way of ensuring that everything falls into place in the most extraordinary way. Trusting God's timing also involves letting go of our need for control. As human beings, we often want to control every aspect of our lives. We want to plan our future down to the smallest detail, and we want things to happen on our timeline. But life doesn't work that way. We can't control everything, and the more we try, the more anxious and stressed we become. Trusting God's timing requires surrender, releasing our grip on the reins and allowing God to lead the way. It's about acknowledging that we don't have all the answers and that God's wisdom far surpasses our understanding. This act of surrender is incredibly liberating. It frees us from the burden of trying to force outcomes and allows us to rest in the knowledge that God is in control. During the waiting period, it's essential to stay connected to God through prayer and reflection. When we're waiting for something important, it's easy to become fixated on what we don't have or what hasn't happened yet. This can lead to frustration, doubt, and even resentment. But when we turn to God in prayer, we are reminded of His presence and His promises. Prayer is not just about asking God to move faster or to give us what we want. It's about aligning our hearts with His will. It's about finding peace in the waiting, knowing that God's timing is always perfect, even when we don't understand it. Through prayer, we can find the strength to keep going, to trust the process, and to maintain a sense of hope, even in the most uncertain of times. Another important aspect of trusting God's timing is recognizing that His delays are not denials. Just because something hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't happen. There are times when God says, wait, because He is working behind the scenes, setting things up in ways that we cannot see. There are also times when God says no because He has something better in store for us. Trusting God's timing means believing that He knows what is best for us, even when it doesn't match our desires. It's about having faith that, in the end, everything will work out according to His plan, and that plan is far greater than anything we could imagine for ourselves. In many cases, we don't fully understand God's timing until we look back. Hindsight is often where we can see the beauty of God's plan unfolding. There may be times in our lives when we were desperate for something to happen, only to realize later that if it had happened on our timeline, we wouldn't have been ready for it. Maybe the job we wanted so badly would have been overwhelming if we had received it earlier, or the relationship we longed for wouldn't have been right at that time. It's only when we look back that we can see how God was protecting us, preparing us, and positioning us for something better. Trusting God's timing also helps us develop a sense of gratitude. When we learn to trust that God is working all things together for our good, we can find joy and gratitude in the present moment, even if we're still waiting for certain things to unfold. Instead of focusing on what we don't have or what hasn't happened yet, we can choose to be grateful for what God is doing right now. Gratitude shifts our perspective. It allows us to see the blessings that are already present in our lives, and it helps us cultivate a sense of peace and contentment, regardless of our circumstances. Trusting God's timing is a journey of faith, patience, and surrender. It's about releasing our need for control and allowing God to lead the way. It's about finding peace in the waiting and believing that God's plan for our lives is always for our good. Even when we don't understand the delays, even when we're tempted to take matters into our own hands, we can rest in the assurance that God's timing is perfect. He is always at work, orchestrating things behind the scenes, aligning circumstances, and preparing us for the blessings to come. When we trust His timing, we open ourselves up to experiencing the fullness of His love, grace, and provision in our lives. The idea that God's plan for your life is greater than you could ever imagine is both comforting and empowering. It speaks to the vastness of God's wisdom and love for us, reminding us that no matter how grand our dreams or ambitions may seem, God's vision for our lives far surpasses anything we could conceive. This truth invites us to step into a life of faith, where we trust not only in the promises of God, but also in His boundless ability to create something far more beautiful and purposeful than we could ever envision on our own. When we reflect on the concept that God's plan is greater than anything we could imagine, it's essential to understand that God sees us fully. He knows us better than we know ourselves. He created us with unique gifts, talents, and purposes that are intricately woven into His divine plan. While we might have goals or desires that seem big to us, God's plan encompasses not just our personal fulfillment, but the ways in which we are meant to impact others, bring light to the world, and fulfill His broader purpose for humanity. This means that when we align ourselves with God's plan, we step into a life that is not only about personal success, but about making a meaningful difference in the lives of others. Often our human tendency is to dream within the confines of what we believe is possible based on our current circumstances. We may set goals or have aspirations, but they are often limited by our perceived abilities, resources, or life situations. However, God's plan for our lives is not constrained by these limitations. In fact, He often calls us to step beyond what we believe is possible, to embrace a vision that feels far beyond our reach. This is because God operates in the realm of the miraculous. He takes our limitations and turns them into opportunities for His power and glory to be revealed. What may seem impossible to us is entirely possible with God. One of the key aspects of understanding that God's plan is greater than we can imagine is realizing that His timing and process may not always align with our expectations. We might have a clear idea of what we want or where we want to go, but God's plan often involves a journey that we cannot foresee. This journey may include challenges, detours, or even periods of waiting, but each step is a necessary part of the process. God uses these experiences to shape us, prepare us, and equip us for the greater plan He has in store. Even the difficult seasons of life are not wasted. They are part of the refining process that leads us toward the fulfillment of God's greater vision for our lives.